More than 300,000 Australians are preparing for a second round of lockdown this morning. Residents in 36 Melbourne suburbs have been ordered to stay at home as the city grapples with a coronavirus outbreak across its north and west.
While other states flagged a further easing of restrictions yesterday, grocery shopping in preparation for stage 3 restrictions began in Victoria's affected areas. Police will be enforcing the orders from midnight tonight, forcing people indoors and some businesses to close. Reporter Stephen Schubert is in one of the affected areas for us. Good morning, Stephen. This is quite extraordinary. We haven't seen something like this before in Australia, where we're having specific areas locked down.
It certainly is unique, Lisa. I'm in Ascot Vale in Melbourne's northwest, and here on Maribyrnong Road is the border of one of these lockdown areas. Everything on this side of me won't be locked down, but if we walk around here, you can see Union Road, which is a big cafe, a restaurant, shopping strip here in Melbourne, and it will be locked down from midnight tonight. So that means that those restaurants, those cafes will have to go back to doing takeaway only. We just had a quick chat to one of the cafe owners who is very concerned about how that is going to affect his business. So more than 300,000 people will be going back into lockdown in these 36 suburbs right across Melbourne.
And Stephen, how on earth are they going to enforce it?
Lisa, there are of course no hard boundaries between suburbs, between postcode zones in Melbourne, so it's going to be relying on largely the goodwill of people living in these suburbs, but also the Premier, Daniel Andrews, has said that booze bus style police roadblocks will be in place, road checks rather, to make sure that people are only leaving their house for approved reasons. There are 4 reasons why people should be leaving if they are in these affected suburbs, and the Premier says that police won't be hesitating to fine people if they are doing the wrong thing. So look, it is going to be a difficult thing to enforce, but if police do happen to catch you out and about when you shouldn't be, you can expect a rather large fine, Lisa.
Yeah, we're just looking at those postcodes now, the places where people are being told they've got to stay inside. I think the fine's about $1,650. Still early morning there, Stephen. You spoke to that cafe operator. Are they agreeing that they will have to do this? They're going to have to abide by the shutdowns? Well,
if you're a business, there is no choice. It's the law of the land. You have to do what you have to do. But the bloke I spoke to, he didn't want to go on camera, but he was saying that it has been extremely tough for him. He's only been open again fully for the last few weeks, and he's only just made it through. He wasn't sure that he is going to get through. It comes, of course, after a large rise in new cases here in Victoria. We saw 64 yesterday, 71 the day before, and authorities are really worried about these new case numbers. They're trying to do everything they can to get a lid on that, and the Premier says that if this doesn't work, the whole state could be heading back into lockdown.
Stephen, thanks very much. We'll touch base with you later in the morning as people start waking up and arriving at their businesses for what will be their last day of being open for a little while. Well, let's take a look at some of the other stories we're following. Australia is boosting its military defences to the tune of $270 billion over the next 10 years. Scott Morrison will warn Australians to prepare for a poorer and more dangerous post-COVID world as he announces the country's updated defence plan today. The nation's military will become larger with a greater focus on the Indo-Pacific region and plans to acquire new long-range missiles and a high-tech underwater surveillance system.
Well, as of today, people claiming paid parental leave will be able to take the last 6 of their 18 weeks whenever they want, giving more flexibility to carers. Parliament passed changes to the federal government's paid parental leave scheme last month. It's hoped the reform will make it easier for primary carers to re-enter the workforce on their own terms.
A panel of health experts and politicians have found that Australia's response to the COVID-19 outbreak has overlooked the fact the majority of Indigenous Australians live in urban areas rather than remote communities. The Health Advisory Committee has warned of blind spots within the system relating to helping Indigenous Australians during the pandemic could contribute to a greater risk of outbreaks. The report also found some families couldn't even access basic items like hand sanitizer.
The top infectious disease expert in the United States has warned the country could soon be recording 100,000 new coronavirus cases a day. America continues to have the highest number of confirmed infections in the world, and it's currently reporting around 40,000 new cases each day. Dr. Anthony Fauci has warned the situation is likely to worsen. He says scenes of people socialising in crowds, often without masks, is one of the reasons he's worried.
Just look at some of the film clips that you've seen of people congregating, often without masks, of being in crowds and jumping over and avoiding and not paying attention to the guidelines that we very carefully put out. We're going to continue to be in a lot of trouble.
Chinese scientists have identified a new strain of flu that they say has the potential to become a pandemic. The influenza is carried by pigs, but it's now been found to also infect humans. Researchers are concerned a further mutation could lead to person-to-person transmission. The World Health Organization says it is monitoring the situation closely.
All right, let's return to Victoria, where more than 30 suburbs will go back into lockdown tonight after a spike in coronavirus cases.
The city has diverted all international flights away for the next 2 weeks, while the Premier has also announced an inquiry into quarantine failures in hotels. Well, I'm joined now by Georgie Tunney outside the Stamford Plaza in Melbourne and Antoinette Collins at Sydney Airport. Georgie, can I start with you? You're outside one of the hotels that is at the centre of one of the clusters at least. What's been done to get the latest outbreak in those Melbourne suburbs under control?
Yeah, standing outside the Stamford Plaza in Melbourne's CBD, Lisa, and the hotel itself has been locked down. There's not too much movement, zero movement in and out, but the street itself still remains a bustling area. There's a lot of construction taking place this morning, and that has been ongoing over the past few weeks as well. You mentioned about the international flights. They have been diverted for the next fortnight away from Victoria and Melbourne in particular. There are reports of 4 international flights that were set to touch down in Melbourne today, carrying around 300 passengers. We don't know yet, don't have confirmation whereabouts they will be diverted to, but the reason for that is so that Victorian authorities can get this latest outbreak under control after the Stamford Plaza behind me and the ridges on Swanston Street were identified as key sources of the latest, or a significant portion of the latest coronavirus outbreak here in the state. Genomic testing has traced back some of those infections, the source of them, to these hotels and the security staff that have been working here. That means that contractors' security staff have contracted the disease while at work. They've headed back home, given it to their families, and some of those family members have then spread it into the wider community, most notably Melbourne's northern suburbs. Where to from here? The Daniel Andrews government says that there will be a judicial inquiry into the hotel quarantine program and just how it went so very wrong. That report is expected to be handed down over the next 8 to 10 weeks. And we do know that Corrections Victoria will now oversee the hotel quarantine program. And it's good to remember that since this program did begin right across Australia, 60,000 returning travellers have been placed into hotel quarantine, around 20,000 of those in Victoria as well, and we are expecting some of the conditions or the regulations that they have when they enter the hotels here in Melbourne might change somewhat and have restricted access to outdoor walks and things like that.
Thanks, Georgie. Antoinette, you're there at the airport in Sydney. Any idea how many flights are coming in? And also, I guess in New South Wales, you've got some restrictions being lifted today.
That's right, Lisa. Well, I have to say it's probably the most deserted I've ever seen Sydney Airport this morning. I had a quick look at the arrivals board just earlier and I couldn't see any flights scheduled to arrive at this stage. It's still pretty quiet. As Georgie mentioned, we don't know where those flights from Melbourne are being redirected to, but New South Wales has borne the brunt of those international return travellers, given just the amount of flights it does have coming in from overseas. Of that 60,000 or so of return travellers, about 25,000 of them have been put up in hotel quarantine in New South Wales, and that's cost the state government here more than $50 million. It's expecting to recoup some of those costs from the other states as the pandemic continues, but it is still quite a significant amount of money. But in terms of the restrictions placed in New South Wales, they're having quite an effect here. As far as we're aware, all the passengers go straight to their hotels and they don't leave their hotel rooms for that 2-week period. And as a result, in terms of the new cases we've had in New South Wales, the overwhelming majority have been those people in hotel quarantine that have been testing positive. We had 5 new cases in New South Wales yesterday, and they were all return passengers in hotel quarantine.
All right.
And in terms of restrictions easing today, people can now be going to more sports events. Bars and restaurants will be allowed to have more people there, but there still be restrictions on Victorians, for example, attending sporting matches here in New South Wales. So there still is a concern about complacency here in New South Wales as those restrictions ease.
Thanks, Antoinette and Georgie. We'll touch base with you as the morning goes on and see how that develops.